You're watching a replay of Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. For more videos just like this, hit that red subscribe button.
Good morning. You're listening to Brain Drain live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. You can watch us anywhere in the world by going to WSAR's Spindle City Autoglass Studio Cam. You can watch me on Facebook Live by going to Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. You can comment below and join the conversation. You also can listen to us anywhere in the world on the TuneIn Radio app. And it's funny, I was just sitting in a restaurant yesterday explaining how somebody could find us on the TuneIn Radio app. It's absolutely free. That's right, absolutely free. You can download the TuneIn Radio app on your phone. You can type in 1480 WSAR or simply WSAR. We pop right up. And you can listen to me live Monday through Thursday, 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And today we're going to be talking about how Big Pharma is being sued not only by people, but by municipalities, by states, by cities. And as of November in 2017, there were 75 cities suing Big Pharma. Now recently, my hometown, Fall River, Massachusetts, has jumped on that bandwagon. The number continues to grow. And let's look at some of these cities. We have Chicago, we have Seattle, we have Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Dayton, Princeton, Philly, Grand Rapids, Quincy, Delray Beach, Louisville, Nassau County, Rockland County. We have states like Utah and West Virginia who are jumping on and deciding that they want to sue Big Pharma. And the reasons that they're citing are, there's kind of all relating to the same thing, and that is that there are too many prescriptions given to too many people. There have been gross amounts of drugs in prescription format handed to people, large prescriptions over an extended period of time, and people are dying because of it. And with that, there has been a lack of inadequate information associated with it. So I can remember seeing commercials. I've seen them after the fact, but I can remember seeing commercials that were put out in the late 90s talking about how a drug like OxyContin was not addictive. Well, I bet they're biting themselves now, wishing that they never put that video out. But think of how many doctors who use this information went and prescribed OxyContin as pain treatment, thinking that this was not going to be addictive. But here's the ultimate question. How is this impacting you? How is the opioid epidemic making your life worse? And I want to add one more piece to this. If we're suing Big Pharma, shouldn't we be asking the American government what they're doing to make this better? Because we've been in Afghanistan since, 2001? And over the past 14 years, poppy production has continued to grow. The Afghanistan government is relying on the production of opium as one of their main crops. And the number has grown, the amount of growth because of opium-related sales have grown, and in 2014, they had never seen more opium export or poppy export than they did in Afghanistan. So the number has continued to increase as long as the American and NATO population has been in Afghanistan. So if we're going to say Big Pharma is to blame, shouldn't we also say that the U.S. government has a stake in this game as well? And I know there's the stories out there of Marines patrolling poppy fields. I know there's the stories out there of the CIA making sure that the poppy continues to grow, but if you really look at what's happening out there, the Afghani government is competing with the Taliban in selling opium. And when that happens, it drives down the price because there's more of a supply of opium readily available. So if there's more of a supply, that means that the price can go down because the demand is increasing, as we know, because it's highly addictive. But if the supply is increasing faster than the demand, drug companies and people who are drug dealers are able to buy this stuff at a cheaper cost. So when we think about how opium production is at an all-time high in Afghanistan, when we think about how the Afghani government is relying on opium and the poppy plant to succeed. We have to ask ourselves the question, is Big Pharma the only people to blame, or is it our own government? Is it the U.S. government? And we're going to continue the conversation. We're talking about opioids, and we're talking about how municipalities are suing big pharmaceutical companies, companies that have been pushing drugs like OxyContin, Vicodin, Percocet, and they're saying that the reason why the opioid epidemic is as large as it is because of the lack of information, and drugs were just prescribed with very little oversight. But if you're going to make that statement, wouldn't the doctors also be to blame too? And I understand, and I think it's a good step suing Big Pharma. But also, we have to ask ourselves the question, if we're going to sue Big Pharma, do we have to sue every single doctor in every single state? Do we also have to sue big government? Do we have to sue the U.S. government? Do we have to sue NATO for protecting the interests of poppy production in Afghanistan? Because there's no reason to explain how poppy production has increased year over year since the U.S. and NATO has been in Afghanistan. So if the U.S. is really trying to do something about this, how have those numbers been able to increase year over year? And in 2016, 42,000 people overdosed on some type of opium-based product. Call in 508-673-1480. Comment below on the Facebook Live page and tell me what you're experiencing. Tell me how this drug is ruining your life. Tell me how this drug has ruined one of your family members' lives. Tell me what you think. Do you think government is to blame? Do you think Big Pharma is to blame? Do you think that doctors are to blame? And I think that we need to start talking about this more clearly, because there's one thing that we need to continue talking about, and it's we need to stop putting the blame on the people who are using. Now, granted, we have to say they are using, but are they addicted on their own free will, or is this an addiction like any other? Is this an addiction like being addicted to gambling? Is this an addiction like being addicted to alcohol, being addicted to sex, being addicted to anything that you could be addicted to, video games, being addicted to the internet, being addicted to tobacco? This could be just like any other addiction. You know what the difference here is? The difference here is it's killing people. So you know what? If you're sitting and you're listening to this show right now and you're smoking a cigarette, you may want to consider yourself lucky, even though you're probably contributing to a long-term death. You may want to consider yourself lucky because what's happening is you're addicted to something that is going to kill you slowly, as opposed to something that could kill you very, 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 very rapidly. Can you imagine being addicted to an opioid? And I know majority of you who are listening right now, everywhere in this country, you have at least known somebody who's either died or who this is affected in some way, shape, or form. And that's scary. And I know recently Donald Trump came out and talked about how this is a national emergency. He came short of calling it an epidemic, which it's almost sad, because if this were called an epidemic, there would have been some serious dollars thrown behind this. And again, in 2016, 42,000 Americans died from this. Now, since 2001, the number that's being thrown out there is 183,000 Americans have lost their lives. Now, when you think about the population of the United States, that seems like a small number. But think about how that impacts the families. And think, is there another thing that has killed this many people? Is there another type of drug that killed 42,000 people in 2016? Is there another disease? And I'd argue cancer may be close to that, or it may be exceeding that. I don't know. I'm going to have to look that up during the break. But when you think about how people's lives are being cut short because of addiction, what can we do to fix this? And is suing Big Pharma going to help that? Because I get it. These municipalities, every single time that somebody goes for an overdose call, they have to spend the money on the ambulance going out there. The state, if they're on the state insurance, has to spend the money on the ambulance people in the ambulance. They have to spend the money on the doctors. They have to spend the money all across the board. Never mind the municipalities who have to pay for the police response, the municipalities who have to pay for the fire department response, who have to pay for the dispatchers who now have to be increased because the call volume goes up. This is something that's affecting every level of government. What say you, caller?
Hi, good morning. I just had an interesting statistic that I stumbled upon the other night. It was a show on PBS. They did a 1-hour special on this opioid epidemic. It was very well done. And one of the statistics that they quoted, I had to actually rewind the DVR a couple times to go back and check it. But they said that the leading cause of death for people 50 and younger is these opioid overdoses.
Wow.
And I was like, wait a minute, did I just hear what I heard? And I went back like 2 times to rewind it and listen to it. And they said the leading cause of death, 50 and younger, is these overdoses. And I was like, wow, that's pretty shocking. So again, I'm quoting from what I heard on this PBS broadcast, but I mean, it was very well done. They had their act together, so I'm assuming that's accurate information. But that's what was put out on this show last week. So.
And think about it. Imagine if you are the person who gets addicted to a drug because you're a teenager, you're playing sports, and you break your ankle, and the doctor puts you on Oxycontin, and now you become dependent on an opioid, and you can't afford it anymore, so you switch to heroin because you're addicted to this drug, and there's really no treatment out there for you because you don't think that you need help until it's too late.
Yeah, this show brought that out very well. Also, they had numerous examples of people with sports injuries, accidents, etc. They were put on prescription medications, and then the doctor cut them off or got too costly, so they switched over to heroin, and then heroin. They had heroin laced with with fentanyl, etc. And if anybody catches, if you do a search on PBS Channel 2 out of Boston, Channel 44 out of Boston, do a search for the opioid epidemic. It's a 1-hour show, very well done, excellent information, non-biased. PBS usually does a pretty good program, but that's one statistic I just wanted to throw out. I assume it's accurate. They did put it on their show, and but that's what they said. Age 50 and younger. When you think about it, car accidents, deaths from other means. That's the leading cause right now for that age group.
Now, I don't know many people who this hasn't affected or hasn't affected somebody around them. How has this affected you, caller?
Well, I think it affects everyone in the fact I believe there's a definite increase in crime. Simple robberies at, convenience stores, muggings on the street, muggings for wallets and purses and these bank robberies, somebody walking. I think, I'm not saying all of it is related to that, but again, people are desperate for money to get these. They really have to have these drugs. So I think there's a definite correlation between some of these crimes that are being committed to the general population as a result of these addictions, because people have to have the money to get these drugs.
Thank you so much for your points. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
You're live in 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Well, good morning.
How you doing?
Hey, is that opiate addiction from under 50? Is that mostly heroin?
Well, opium addiction, it'd be opium-based products, so it could be anything. Fentanyl, it could be Oxycontin, Oxycodone. I didn't see the video, but the statistic that I gave you from 2016, the 42,000 people, was anything opium-based.
Right. It's no doubt that the number one drug is heroin today, and fentanyl.
Well, they're mixing fentanyl into the heroin.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things that I'm aware of, because you're the guy that can jump a fence, and I'm the guy that can't.
Are you sure I can still jump a fence?
Listen, every once in a while, the leg flames up twice the size. And I went in to see my doctor and get some Motrin 800 to take down the swelling and stuff. Matter of fact, the nurse practitioner I had to see that day said, you should be in a hospital because you might have a blood clog in your leg. But they checked, and thank God I didn't have a blood clog. Anyway, to make it short, most of my orthopedics are Mass General. And she, in Fall River, turned on that computer and looked everything up that they set up in Boston.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, they basically, she just went over the records up in Boston. So to think that when you prescribe medication and when they ask for your list of medication, they can't go onto that computer and make sure you're not lying.
That prescription drug thing was actually started because of local pharmacy people, and now there's a prescription drug monitoring program in the state of Massachusetts. That's not happening around the country yet.
Nationally, in a way. Today, that's the first thing they ask for. Give me your list of medications.
Yeah, but they're relying on you at that point in time.
Well,
the prescription drug monitoring.
Listen. Could you please hear me out for a minute?
Hold on. I just want to finish. I want to finish my point, caller.
So you just gave them and go to the computer in their office while you're in the room with the doctor, and it doesn't come out correctly. Well, they're going to stop your medication.
All right, so the only thing that I want to say is that's something that you're experiencing in Massachusetts and maybe Rhode Island. But if you go to the middle of the country, they do not have a prescription monitoring program, and the only information they have is the records on you that they have immediately available and who you tell them that your doctors are.
I would wonder why they don't, then.
All right, and that's something that needs to be worked on.
Wouldn't that be your local government?
Well, that'd be your local government wherever you are in the country, or that'd be the federal government saying that this is a requirement by the FDA. But thank you so much for your points. Have a great day.
If there was any points to be made.
No, you made some great points. Have a great day.
I'm just saying that, there is a monitoring service. Some folks like me who have back issues, leg issues. I've been through 5 major surgeries. Maybe want to go for my 6th one, but I'll wait, because of scar tissue and all that good stuff. It ain't fun. It's not. But I can understand. I mean, years and years and years. I'm still talking to you, man. I listen, and I know someone else, young issues, abuse the medication. You start abusing your medication, you're going to be in trouble. That's all I got to say. She passed away. She OD'd. It's a shame because she had a child and all. So
thank you so much.
God bless our nation.
You got it. Have a great day. You're live on 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Rich. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm well. I just wanted to comment. I think this whole drug epidemic is basically a jobs program. Because if you, I think you said 180,000 people have died.
Yes, 183,000 as of 2001.
So compare that to how many people do you think are employed directly or indirectly as a result of drug addiction?
I think that's a fair point. How many people are making lots and lots of money, or not lots of money, but how many people are employed to treat this ailment? So
on top of that, though, there's also obviously drug companies that are making lots and lots of money.
So I think your point is, if we did eradicate this disease, would we in turn hurt our economy because so many people are reliant on this income?
Oh no! I think by all means we need to get rid of addiction as much as we can. But I think when it comes to when you talk about things like what is the federal government doing about it, what is the FDA doing about it, what is what's being done, and the answer is they're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound and calling it a day. Because I think there are people in politics and very powerful places that understand that, this is their cash cow. This is how they're keeping the economy moving to an extent, certain parts of the economy. And this is how they can say, listen, we've got, jobs in the prison system. We've got jobs in nurses, doctors. The FDA is making a lot of money. You have law enforcement making a lot of money, so on and so forth. That it's a sad case that morally it's not the right thing to do. Obviously, the right thing to do would be to pour tons and tons of time and money and effort into eradicating this. But the truth is, I don't see that happening because it benefits more people than it hurts.
You know, I think you're bringing up a fair point, and we'll continue that conversation on the other side of the break. Thank you for your call. Tell me, who do you think is to blame for this? Do you think it's Big Pharma? Do you think it's government? Do you think it's lobbying firms, which we're going to get into right now? Do you think that it's just the people? And I think we really have to start talking about victim blaming. But let's get into lobbying firms, because the previous caller brought that up, right? A lot of people are making a lot of money off of people dying every single year. And somebody commented on Facebook, our government played as much a part in the epidemic as the drug dealers selling it illegally do. And also said, honestly, who cares about their income? People are dying because the opioid epidemic, that's what matters here. And you know, that's a fair point. Should people be able to make a ton of money on people dying? We've seen tobacco companies get sued. We've seen alcohol companies get sued because of deaths, because of claiming ignorance. And that's exactly why municipalities are suing Big Pharma. But if they're suing Big Pharma, should they be suing big government because of lobbying firms? And when you talk to people at the federal level about things like pain mitigation through the use of marijuana, medicinal marijuana, they kind of hold fast a little bit. And there's a reason for that. Because Big Pharma and their lobbying firms are giving politicians large amounts of money to make sure that their interests are protected. And you know, one of the things that will hurt Big Pharma's interests, if medicinal marijuana starts becoming legalized around the country. And it already has. But now Jeff Sessions is talking about allowing the U.S. attorneys to start cracking down on some of that, going back on some of the policy that's related to marijuana. But ask yourself this question. If marijuana were implemented as part of the pain mitigation process, because people aren't overdosing on marijuana, and I can't ever remember a case of that actually happening, and if you know of a case of somebody overdosing on marijuana and dying because of the use of the drug, please call in 508-673-1480. But why wouldn't it be a natural step to say, as part of the pain mitigation process, before we put you on something that's highly addictive, whether you agree marijuana is addictive or not, highly addictive and can kill you, which is an opioid, why don't we start out the process with something that may or may not be addictive and won't kill you? Why don't we start out with the process by saying, hey, maybe this will help with your pain, maybe this will help with the other ailments that you face, because it's not going to kill you. And then we say, hey, if that doesn't work, then the next step in pain mitigation would be an opioid at that point in time. Why doesn't that happen? I'll tell you why. Because Big Pharma doesn't want it to happen. They're spending tons and tons and tons and tons of money trying to protect their interests. And politicians, through things like Citizens United, are raising hundreds and thousands of dollars to protect interests. So the government is making a lot of money from this, but not only the government is making a lot of money from the opioid epidemic, I'd make the argument that campaign finance accounts are making tons of money from the opioid epidemic. Congressmen and senators around this country are making tons of money from people dying on the streets. They don't realize it because it's very indirect, and a lot of them are politicians, so I'm sure they're going to try to talk their way around it. But you can't dispute the fact that the Afghanistan poppy production has increased since the occupation of the United States year over year. It has increased. Think about that for a second. If we do not want overdoses to happen, if we do not want addictions to happen in the United States, then why would we allow the Afghani government to increase poppy production, which creates opium, which is the derivative of things like morphine, things like Oxycontin, oxycodone, things like heroin. Wow. So really, when you get down to it, the United States has sat idly by and watched as the Afghani government has made tons and tons and tons of money on production of opioids, production of heroin. Amazing. And I get why they're doing it. It's because of the fact that the Afghani government is trying to compete with the Taliban economically. And what better way to do that than to have them competing in the crop that is making them tons and tons of money? Because before 2001, it was the Taliban who were controlling the fields and making tons of money. So now they're saying, hey, we're going to allow the Afghani government to make that happen. And granted, if you talk to a U.S. official, they're going to tell you that's not the case. We're not supporting that. But turning a blind eye is support. Right? If somebody dies in the streets from a heroin overdose and you turn a blind eye, did you just murder that person because you've been complicit in their death? Do you have a duty to call 911? Well, if you're a U.S. official in the Congress or the Senate, or if you're the President of the United States, or if you hold one of these offices, is it your duty to talk about the fact that one of the countries that you invaded and one of the countries that you've occupied for an extended period of time is making money on Americans dying? Granted, they're not killing people in Afghanistan at the rate that they were before, but they're still making money on Americans dying. That's scary. And we are talking about the opioid epidemic. We're talking about how cities, municipalities, whether they be towns, they be cities, whether they be the states, are suing big pharmaceutical companies because of the opioid epidemic. And they're saying the reason is there are too many prescriptions, and there's too many prescriptions being prescribed to too many people, and the length of time that the prescriptions were being prescribed for were not adequate. They're also saying that there's a lack of or inadequate information that supports the statistics that they stated. And somebody on Facebook Live said, when you own a certain percentage of the government, you can do anything you want. And the question is it the people who are quote-unquote owning the government who's making this happen? But, I want to make this a little more closer to your personal situation. And the way that we're going to do that is I think we have to talk about how this is impacting the everyday life of the average person. And the only way to do that is to talk about real-world experiences and how this has impacted families, how this has impacted your friends, how this has impacted everyone around you. And all you have to do is simply go for a ride down your town or your city street, and you're going to see how this impacts people. Go to a ride to the hospitals. Talk to a first responder. Talk to somebody who works in the police department, and they will tell you that this is something that is pervasive. This is something that is getting worse and worse as time goes on. And granted, I know that the statistics about deaths have dropped because of the implementation of Narcan, but overdoses, they're flat, or they're growing, or they're slightly decreasing. Why are we allowing this to happen? Why? And, I'm going to start hearing from you. 508-673-1480 to call in live on the station phone line. Again, that number is 508-673-1480. Good morning. How you doing?
Hey, Rich.
How's your day going?
It's going good.
So, what say you?
Talking about the opiates.
That's right.
It's really getting out of hand. I lost my son when he was like 17 in a couple of months.
Wow.
To an overdose of heroin.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And, and I always asked him, how come you're not just like smoking pot or something? He said, too expensive. And I guess heroin was real cheap. Well, bottom line is 11 kids OD'd, nine made it. One from Tiverton died, and one from Fall River died, and that was my boy.
Wow.
He'd be 41 now. The things you miss, grandkids, all stuff like that. It's tough.
You don't expect to bury your kids.
No. I never thought I'd see his name up there first before me and my wife.
Wow. And I empathize for you because I can only imagine what you're going through.
You just got to hang in there. If your kid's got a problem, I sent my kid in twice. He never made it to the third one, You just hang in there, Hang in there with him. Support him.
Well, I think that's the key thing, right? And we're going to start talking about the support in the second hour and what we can do to make it better.
You know, everybody, at the first few years when he died, the stigma was there, you know?
Right.
We just say he got in with the wrong crowd. Then after about 10 years of that, I said, bullshit. I'm going to tell it the way it is. He OD'd on heroin.
Yeah.
And there was no hiding it anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and it's a shame because if more people talked about it, I think people would realize how pervasive it actually is. And what we tend to do is we tend to hide it. We tend to scrutinize. We tend to actually, when I opened up the show today, I played the song "The Outsider" by A Perfect Circle, and that song is about somebody who's never experienced the illness and points and says, "You can do better. You can fix this," but doesn't really understand what's going on in that person's head.
Well, I enjoyed the show today. I hope I added a little bit for you.
Listen, you actually did, because in the second hour, we're going to start talking about what we can do and what we should be spending time on to help people get clean.
I mean, look what happened to Chris Heron, you know?
Yeah, basketball player. And
everything going, and he ended up shooting heroin in the end. And I'm glad he got his life together. Now he's going out and he's really fighting for the cause of the addiction and all that. He's got his crap together. But he had a struggle.
Well, thank you for...
There was a picture, there was a movie on Chris Heron and two other professional ball players. When he played for some team, they kept him under wrap. He said that was the cleanest he ever was for a year. They'd take him out to eat. There was always somebody with him.
I think that was the Unguarded documentary.
That's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your call.
Okay,
I
take
appreciate
care.
the perspective.
Have a great day.
You too. And before we go to the next person on the line, I want to point out some Facebook comments. Somebody said, the government wants lots of people to die. It's called population control. You don't think there's a cure for cancer somewhere? We'll never see it. Somebody else said, it's all about population control. Lost someone who I loved. Good people make bad choices too. All we can do is spread knowledge and be a good support system, but don't enable them. What say you? Good morning. You're live on Brain
Rick,
Train.
how you doing?
I'm doing great.
I just find it interesting that the Attorney General is, going to fight the issue with the legalized marijuana for medical use and whatnot. But he hasn't taken up a fight against opiates.
I think that's a fair question.
Yeah, and what's more harmful right now? The opiate. But it costs like big corporations, and I forget the name of the corporation. 60 Minutes did a special. Someone that was working for the DEA, and he tried to fight the system. He has since left, but he has no problem speaking out against it. The money that is made. And then they're fined millions of dollars, which is nothing compared to what they're making.
Right. It's percentages of their profit.
That's right. And
small percentages.
It's like anything else. Let them eat cake attitude. And that's what's happened with this country with our leaders. And I found something interesting in the paper. Senator Markey, when he voted against the funding bill, along with great Senator Warren, he said part of his reasoning for that was lack of sufficient aid for Puerto Rico and communities devastated by the opiate crisis. Well, where's he been for the last 2 years? He's never been down here to talk to people about it.
And to make the statement that we expect to see our senators on a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis, I have personally seen, and in South Coast, Massachusetts, I have personally seen Senator Markey here in South Coast, Massachusetts.
When? When's the last time he was here?
I want to say maybe 6 months ago, 7 months ago.
Okay, 6 months ago, and prior to that, he was never here.
Okay, and they have other things to do, and I'm not trying to justify. I'm not trying to justify.
But they are our U.S. senator, and I know the Senate's responsibility is different than a representative's responsibilities.
Right.
But don't live high on the hog and lecture us.
I think that's fair.
He doesn't know exactly what the issues are down here. Matter of fact, he hasn't got a local office, does he?
So here's something to consider. One of the things I say on a regular basis, or I ask the question, are people who are our federal representatives too far removed to understand the people that they represent? And that's something that you could ask around the country. That's not something that you ask.
No, not just not around. They are too far removed.
Right.
They are too far removed.
And
they don't even pay for their damn haircuts.
thank you for your call.
Have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Good morning. You're on Brain Drain. How you doing?
Good morning, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
You remember back in the 80s when Noriega was the big player and the dealer?
Yep.
And you know who protected him?
Well, actually, let me clarify. I don't remember because I was too young, but I've read and I've seen. Yes. Who was
CIA protected him,
Yes.
and Mr. Daddy George Bush
George
was the head of
Bush.
the CIA.
That's right, George
That's all
Bush.
I want to say to you, sir. Have a great day.
Thank you. And it's funny because one of the arguments that's being made about the growth of the poppy in Afghanistan, the argument is being made, and granted, you could say it's conspiracy theorists, you could say it's bloggers, but they're saying that the CIA is one of the big players in promoting the growth of the poppy in Afghanistan. And when you think about why it's happening, the Afghan government is trying to compete with the Taliban. That is very CIA-like, trying to manipulate the economies of countries to kind of put down one of their enemies. So ask yourself the question, do you think that government is more involved even than they're leading on? Because there's one thing that we can say for certain, and that is that opium production has increased in Afghanistan since 2001. So soldiers have gone out there, fought and died, and now people are dying here in the United States based on the interests of the Afghani government because it's one of their largest exports. So the poppy production has increased over a 14-year period of time and hit a record high in 2014, I want to say it is. Yes, 2014. I haven't been able to find a more recent statistic, but as of 2014, it was year over year, it was increasing. So ask yourself this question. Does the government know more than they're saying that they know? And if you're going to sue big pharma companies, then do you in turn have to sue big government? And let's get right back into the conversation. So we were previously talking about the cities that are suing big pharma. We've also talked about how the government may have some play because of their involvement in Afghanistan. We've talked about how many people this has impacted. 183,000 people since 2001, and that number continues to grow. I couldn't find 2017 statistics yet. 42,000 people died in 2016. And we talked about lobbying firms and how they're protecting the interests of these big pharmaceutical companies. If you want to join the conversation and tell us about the place that you're in because of what this has done, this heinous drug has done to you, call in 508-673-1480 because there are a lot of municipalities who are suing. There are 75 cities as of November in 2017 who jumped on the bandwagon of suing Big Pharma. There's a couple of states. People are really stepping up. And it seems that the conversation is attempting to shift from heroin and opioids to marijuana. And somebody said on Facebook, exactly, we're focused on marijuana control. What a waste of time. We need to use time and our money wisely. We need leaders to start focusing on what people are dying from. Our next generation is seeing all this. Do our reps understand what people are really going through? No. They are not enough involved in what is really going on. Talk, no action. Thank you for that comment on the Facebook page. If you want to join the conversation but you don't want to call in, you can go to the Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceras Facebook page, type your comments below, and we will talk about them here on the air. So if you agree, if you disagree, 508-673-1480. I want to hear from you. Lines are lighting up. You're live on 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hi, Rich. Did you see the New Yorker last month? Last month or the month before? I think it's last month. It all comes down to one family from Connecticut. Starla, I think his name, Starla.
Okay, so elaborate on it.
Check out that article. It's really in-depth about how they're the ones who invented OxyContin. And the money they made is unbelievable. And their influence, their lobbying influence is just beyond belief because they're billionaires as it is. And they made billions. I think the headline is they made billions and hundreds of thousands died or whatever. Check it out. It's definitely worthwhile. It goes to right what you're speaking. It's beyond Big Pharma. It comes down to one family down in Stamford, Connecticut. They own a pharmaceutical company.
Now, how do you feel about this drug? How is it impacting you?
It's not personally, but I mean everybody's impacted by it. You know, there's an overdose every day anywhere, And I don't know what the solution is. And it's, as bad as Fall River and the cities are hit, it really hit. Like Montpelier, Vermont, tiny little town, basically, in some parts of New Hampshire became like ground zero, and still are. But, when they talk about the invention of OxyContin and how, it's 3 times as strong as morphine or something, and medical society has a lot to blame for this. And it's easy for me to say I'm not suffering from cancer and dying of pain, but when you think about it, before we had it, we survived. I mean, the pain is excruciating, but now they can't help anybody. And I understand it's human nature. You want to get rid of the pain. You're like, what else do you have? Well, doctors just started prescribing this, and it all goes down to this one family. I think it's SPALER is the name of the family, but check it out in the New Yorker.
Now, I also want to add one more part to the conversation, and I appreciate you calling in, but I want to add this part, and I want to ask this question of you. Do you think that we're doing enough to eradicate this problem?
No, I think it's that. But I think they should remove OxyContin and go back to pharmaceutical companies shouldn't make it anymore.
Okay.
It should just end. Then you go back to just heroin, and that's bad enough. And then you try to wean off that. I like the direction it's going, where I think it should be legalized and controlled. I think once it's legalized, you take out. I was always for drug legalization. I think it works in Europe and everything. Portugal has it. Amsterdam, a few other countries. You eliminate the violence, because if I can buy heroin, go to a store and get with a prescription, and with the prescription, I'm also undergoing mandatory drug treatment and maybe being weaned off, then why do I go to you on the street and take a risk of getting shot or shooting over the money? It eliminates the middleman that's making a lot of money in the thieves.
Yeah, I think you bring up some very, very fair, some very well thought out points. And I appreciate you giving me a little bit of a kind of look at where I should be looking to find out about how much money they're actually making, or one specific family is making on the opioid epidemic. Thank you.
And if you look, just one more thing, if people who are against legalization of drugs, all you have to look at is prohibition and the violence with the bootleggers. That was unbelievable. And what happened? Once it becomes legal, that violence is over.
Well,
so all these, like, the Pablo Escobar, although he's an old, from the 80s and he's dead now, but the Mexican cartel is a limit. They no longer have, there's no reason for them to exist if it's controlled by the government. They lose all their cachet and all their, their violence and everything. So then you can't fight. People are going to do drugs. People are going to drink. People smoke. And look what we've done to smoking. We've pretty much diminished it to nothing. So what you do is through education, and you're always going to have people who are addicted. You always try to treat those people, but you eliminate the law enforcement end of it, because law enforcement should not be trying to eradicate something that they can't do. So it's violence against violence. You eliminate that, and now those guys are out of business as drug traffickers, and then we put all that money that we're blowing on drug raids and everything into education.
Well, thank you, because you've actually added to the conversation. Once we get back from the break, we're going to talk about the war on drugs, too. So I appreciate the call, and thank you for listening, and have a great day.
You too.
Thanks. I want to point out a couple of comments. Somebody was just talking about the war on drugs and how they think that it's failed because drug busts and throwing people in jail doesn't work. Somebody on Facebook commented, drug raids are saving lives. Keeping drugs off the streets, that's crazy. So, let's continue the conversation. Do you think the war on drugs has worked? Do you think the war on drugs isn't working? Do you think cracking down and raiding houses is being productive? Do you think the people who have been incarcerated with mandatory minimum sentences has helped our society? What say you? Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
Pretty good. I got 3 points to make.
Sure.
First, the Afghanistan thing. The Trump administration has been bombing the poppy fields in Afghanistan for about 3 months now.
Okay.
I'm a retired Army pilot, and I belong to several military organizations. One is the Air Force Association, and I get a newsletter every day on an email on that.
Now, the question is, caller, are they blowing up the Taliban poppy fields, or are they blowing up the Afghani government poppy fields? Because there's two different fields, or two different sets of fields.
I don't know about two different fields. All I know about is that they are blowing up the poppy fields, which Taliban has been using to expand their operations.
Right. So Afghanistan, the government, is also making money off of the poppy distribution. So it sounds to me like they're blowing up the Taliban poppy fields, but they're not blowing up the ones that contribute to the Afghani government.
Okay, I'll look into that and see.
Sure.
That's interesting. Another thing is I lost my son at the age of 49.
I'm sorry to hear that, sir.
Had heart failure.
Wow.
He started using marijuana when he was 15, back in the mid-'70s. And expanded from marijuana into cocaine into various other kind of drugs. I don't even know how many different kind of drugs he was on. It was alcohol, was all this kind of stuff. Eventually his body gave out from heart failure, but they said it was from the fact that he just worn it out through all that use.
Wow.
So marijuana is a gateway drug as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
The thing with Sessions, the Congress has passed a law which says that states that have legalized medical marijuana, that Congress has allowed that to go. In other words, to be in effect.
Okay.
So it's the states that have legalized it for recreational use is the one that the federal government perhaps will go against. So that's the gist of those things. And I'm dead set against marijuana. I'm dead set against any kind of illegal drug use. OxyContin, I've had a major jaw surgery, and I had a week and a half worth of OxyContin that they gave me, and it worked fine. I didn't get addicted or any of that baloney. Last April, I had a pacemaker put in, and they gave me OxyContin for 6 days.
Wow.
Which was about 8 pills, and, it worked fine. I had no problems with it, and, of course, I didn't have the pain. So.
Well, I think the days are gone of giving 30-day prescription of painkillers because of the light that has been shined on opioid-based medication.
That's right. Yep, you're absolutely right, and that's good.
Because if you would have had that surgery 10 years ago, you might have got a 30-day prescription.
I might have, you're right. But in any case, I don't believe that I'd ever have gotten addicted to it because I just don't believe in that stuff.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for your points, and thank you for your opinions, and, I really, really appreciate it because it's important to hear every side of this argument.
Yep.
Have a great day, caller. Thank you. And we're going to continue the conversation. Somebody on Facebook Live said that Trump's taking out poppy fields. Love it. Also, both are being used for wrongdoing, and that's the poppy fields. Government and Taliban are one there. So they're saying that the government and the Taliban in Afghanistan are one. And, thank you for your opinion. Please continue adding your opinion because, as you can see, if you're commenting on Facebook Live, I'm talking about it here on the air because it's important that we bring up every side of this discussion because it's something that impacts every single person who's listening right now in some way, shape, or form. So let's kind of switch the topic, or we've kind of brought it up a little bit due to a previous caller. The war on drugs. Back in the time of Richard Nixon, when the war on drugs started, and it was even pushed a little bit further during Ronald Reagan, there were major crackdowns, and police were used as this, and the DEA was created. All this stuff was used to kind of break up the drug epidemic. Let's not call it epidemic. The drug influx into the United States. So you had DEA agents and the CIA going to Central America, South America. You had the CIA and the DEA going to other parts of this world trying to crack down on the drugs that were killing people in the United States. And the funny thing about this is mandatory minimum sentencing was changing people's lives. If you got caught with possession of marijuana in New York in the 1980s, you may get a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years. We're talking about legalizing this drug. So people who were caught with marijuana 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we're getting mandatory minimum sentences of 15 years. How many people have served sentences, have been incarcerated because of a drug that we're about to legalize? And I'm not just pointing to this particular thing. I could point to prohibition, right? How many people went to jail for for creating alcohol or the distribution of alcohol when it was considered illegal? Now it's something that you can get at a corner store if you're 21 years old. Marijuana is about to be the same thing in some states. So how many people have been negatively affected? How many families have been negatively impacted? How many houses have been raided? And children have had to see this kind of negative impact because of the war on drugs. Is it working? Or do we go to a system that is more like the European model where they decriminalize everything and they say, hey, we're going to help you get clean? And on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about methods that you could use to help people get clean. Here, somebody said, let's be honest, alcohol is a drug. People forget how many lives are lost every year because of this legal drug. Alcohol is more of a gateway drug than any other, but because it's legal, people forget about it and never factor those statistics into the overall equation. Thank you for your point. You can also listen to us anywhere in the world on the TuneIn Radio app by typing in WSAR. I'm on Monday through Thursday, 9 to 11 a.m. You're live in 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Rich.
How you doing?
Good. A caller before the news brought up, I thought, a really good point. He brought up Manny Noriega.
Oh, go for it.
Now, you kind of wondered, by what right did America grab the leader of another country who hadn't declared war on us? But then we got to remember who was the president when we grabbed him. George H.W. Bush, translation, CIA. My conclusion is, why did we grab him to keep our thumb on top of him, to keep his mouth shut? You know, he was very connected to our CIA, and we got to remember something else. You know, the CIA got a lot of its money for clandestine operations, money off the book, so Congress couldn't keep an eye on them, so they could fight communism by running the drugs.
Do you think that still happens?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you think that's
sure
happening in Afghanistan right now?
Huh?
Do you think that's happening in Afghanistan right now with the poppy trade?
I don't know, but it could be. Absolutely. Then we got to look at something else. You know, it all comes down to you follow the money. Or another way of saying it from the movie Wall Street, it's all about money. Everything else is just conversation. One of the other issues we've got is we're fighting a drug war in many levels. What I mean by that is not simply the drug cartel anymore. It's our own drug companies. You know, for crying out loud, we were going to have a head of the drug czar was going to be a person who put in legislation to stop going after the drug companies. We have the head of the Health and Human Services is Big Pharma himself. What do you think the chances are with that kind of thing we're going to stop any of this nonsense?
I think that's a fair question, and I think ultimately we have to hear the responses of it. And the issue is there hasn't really been a response. And I agree. If we're talking about clearing the swamp, or draining the swamp, I think is the exact statement. If we're talking about draining the swamp, we don't replace them with the same people who created the swamp. And I think that kind of happened. One thing that I can say is the draining the swamp has created tax reform. And I don't want to get into a tax reform conversation. I'm just stating that you could argue that this has actually worked.
Well, you know, if you do some quick calculation, I did it over the weekend. It only requires 8th grade math. The tax cuts for corporations are actually over 78%. In other words, their taxes have been cut over 78%. And, you know, whether it's going to be a tax cut for the little guy, time will tell. But on the drug thing too, we got to remember another thing. We're now getting it from China in terms of things like fentanyl through the mail.
You know, the mail is a tough thing, and what we've
It's
seen
a tough
is
nut to crack. Absolutely.
and the tough part is they're decreasing the funding for the Postal Service more and more every single year.
And one last thought,
sure.
I hear Mulvaney today making the argument for the wall that it's going to help with stopping drugs. Are you kidding me? It's like, I wondered, the drug cartel is so rich. When were they going to actually buy old diesel submarines from the old Soviet Union and use it to ship drugs? Well, you know what? I wasn't so wrong. Instead, they were building their own fiberglass semi-submersibles to transport the drugs. Question, and it dangles. I know you can't answer it, and I can't answer it. How do you stop something that is so profitable?
Thank you so much for your points.
Good.
Thank you for your question. Have a great day. You're live on 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. I never agree with anything that last guy ever says, but I agree with a lot of what he just said. It's definitely a money thing. You'll never see drugs legalized because there's too many people getting fat and rich fighting it. There are also people getting fat and rich, with pharmaceutical companies, greasing politicians, putting money in their pocket. I blame doctors and pharmaceutical companies for a lot of the problem we have today. From a law enforcement standpoint, I think the war on drugs is unwinnable. There's got to be another way, and I'm thinking lately that maybe the European model is the way to go, or a hybrid of it and what we're doing now. I'm not sure, but we got to take different steps.
Now, it's interesting that you say this because I think I know who this is, and you're in law enforcement,
Yeah,
correct?
you do. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, so it's interesting because the more and more I talk to people in law enforcement, the more and more they're saying that the work that they've done over the past 30, 40 years hasn't really been having an impact.
Nope, it's just getting things like giving people Narcan. Yeah, it's all well and good. You're going to save lives or whatnot. But what you're also doing, and you can argue with me all you want. It's my opinion. You're enabling those people. They literally sit around, see how high they can get, and their buddy's right on the side of them. He's going a little too far. Hit him with the Narcan, bring him back. Problem is, sometimes the Narcan doesn't work because you don't know what you're getting. It's not pharmaceutical grade. It's mixed, in a basement somewhere or a garage or whatever. And sometimes the Narcan doesn't work.
Now, I want to point this out because you make a point, and it's a point that I've heard a lot, and I disagree with that point. But that being said, I just want to point out this one part. Majority of the people who are using know that Narcan might not save their lives. So the play with death, the Russian roulette of sitting there with your buddy on the side of you with Narcan, isn't something that necessarily happens because odds are if one person's getting high, the other person is getting high with them, and somebody isn't just sitting idly by waiting with the Narcan.
I'm not saying it's the golden rule. I'm just saying it does happen. I'm not saying everybody that shoots up does it that way. I'm just telling you it does. I've got Narcan at home because I'm afraid my dogs are getting into something, walking my dogs and get into a packet of heroin or whatever. So I keep it around. You don't know. It's so much of it out there that it's an unwinnable. You're never going to stop it. Yeah, it's like guns. They talk about, we'll take all the. You'll never take all the. They make guns in a jungle in Brazil, for God's sake. You think that you're going to stop an industrialized country like the United States from having guns? Same thing with drugs. It's never going to stop. You can make it. They make them at home.
Well, there's one thing that I agree with you on, and the best way to stop somebody who's not supposed to have a gun is somebody who's supposed to have a gun.
Yeah. Yep. The drug thing's I think it's a lot more complicated, but we got to do something different because what we're doing isn't working. And the other thing that I see, and I started this job, I was a little callous about things, like throw them all in jail, whatever. That's not the answer. I see a lot of guys, and as a matter of fact, I was just talking to one where once they got a criminal record, it's so hard for them to re-enter society and get a decent job or whatever because of that criminal record. That's,
right.
I'm not just, like I've told you this before, I'm not the same guy I was 10 years ago, not even the same guy I was yesterday. Those things happened yesterday. It changed my mind on, on life and how to live it. It's the same thing with these people. They gotta, there's gotta be a gateway out, and not saying just give it to them. Let them earn it, though. Just like citizenship. Let somebody earn it.
We'll have that conversation, I'm sure, at another point in time. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your call. I appreciate your opinions. Have a great day.
You too, man.
Thank you. And the caller brought up something that I think is very, very important to talk about. And how do we help people get clean? Because one of the things that's happening right now is we kind of have the continuum of care, right? So somebody goes and they go for addiction. They usually go to some type of detox facility where they get prescribed some type of drug that weans them off, or it stops them from using heroin, Oxycontin, whatever the opioid may be. But then eventually, if those drugs don't work, they get put on something called methadone. And methadone is really just kind of an observed opioid. So you have to ask yourself the question, why is it that we're treating drug usage with drug usage? Why is it that people who are trying to get clean are not also getting the social work necessary so they can go get a good job? Because odds are, if somebody's been addicted to an opioid, or not odds, but I would say there's a lot of people who have been addicted to an opioid who have a criminal background because they've done some things that they shouldn't have done. And it's very difficult for those folks to go find a job. So now they can't find a job. They're sitting in their house because they don't know what to do. Their depression is setting in. What are they more likely to do? They're more likely to use again. So if we want people to get clean, we can't just throw them another drug and say, hey, this one's going to make you feel better, and then let them off to their own devices. Shouldn't we start focusing on helping them find a job that's going to help them become productive in society? Shouldn't we help them find a way to kind of deal with the demons that they're dealing with? Because addiction is a thing, and a lot of times there's dual diagnosis. They might have depression, they may have some type of bipolar disorder, or something along those lines where they're trying to self-medicate, and they still won't get the necessary access that they need to counseling. So shouldn't we be focusing on those things even more so than we're focusing on medicated treatment? I want to hear your opinions on this. And today we're talking about the big pharma companies being sued by municipalities. We're talking about how government may have had a hand in people being addicted and the addiction rate growing to opioids because of their involvement in the Afghanistan economy and protecting the poppy, or potentially protecting the poppy production for the government. We also have talked about the war on drugs. Has it helped? Has it hurt? Has it hurt? There we go. We talked about lobbying firms and what impact they're having on your federal and state officials and their way that they vote. We also talked about how to help people get clean. And I want to kind of talk about something that somebody said on Facebook. And they said, in my opinion, it isn't alcohol nor cannabis that are gateway substances. It's the ADD meds given to children. We teach them it's okay to take a pill every day and stabilize our mood. So we're still talking about the gateway drug. Somebody else says legal narcotics like methadone are wrong and at the taxpayer expense. Just my opinion. This just keeps a big problem continuing. Now, I want to clarify something that I talked about, because I talked about medically assisted treatment. So methadone, Vivitrol, things like that. So I want to point out that just saying that this is a bad way to do it, I don't think that that's okay. I think that only doing medically assisted treatment will never work. What I do think is medical assisted treatment coupled with counseling, coupled with things like social work, so that way people can go and get a job and be productive. That's the way to make it work, because a lot of times people just can't cut an opioid cold turkey. Majority of times they can't cut an opioid cold turkey. So if they're looking to do that, they can't, because it's pretty impossible. Their brain is all messed up when they cut this cold turkey. They're having an addiction, and they'll go through some serious withdrawals. So medical assisted treatment is sometimes, a lot of the time, necessary. But to say that medical assisted treatment is the sole way to do this is not okay. We need to start focusing on spending the money on things that don't make Big Pharma richer, right? So Big Pharma gets rich on getting you hooked. They get rich on keeping you clean. And then if you relapse, they get rich on getting you hooked again. How does that make sense? What we should be doing is we should be spending the money on the social services and the social work and the counseling necessary to help people get better. And we're going to go to the lines. Call you live in 1480 WSAR. Good morning. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. How you doing?
Oh, no, I'm doing great. I had a quick question.
Sure.
I know I read somewhere that in some place down south, there's a town of about, 10, 15,000 people in a county, and they'd shipped 10 million OxyContin pills there. They said that should have raised alarm bells. I don't know if you saw that story.
You know, I saw a story about people in Seattle, Washington being tested, and they were unknowingly tested about the effects of the opioid epidemic.
Well, my question is, has anybody done a calculation? If you look at how many pills are illegally used in the opioid epidemic, what percentage of drug company profits that represents? Is it 10%, 20%?
You know, I think that's a fair question, because we don't only talk about the drugs that were legally used, but you're also insinuating, or you're talking about the people who maybe don't use all their prescription drugs, then sell it illegally on the black market, and somebody else uses it. You're also talking about the drugs that are taken in robberies at pharmaceutical companies. You're kind of encompassing all that stuff.
Even doctors that are part of the cutting on the deal. They write a prescription. It's totally illegal, and somebody else cashes it in and sells it.
Yeah.
But if we know what the legal use is, and we can calculate what the illegal use is, we know that if every law was enforced and everybody obeyed the law, the drug companies would make 20% less money. And I don't think that's lost on them either, or the family in Connecticut that one of your previous callers was talking about. Anyway, that was the only point I wanted to make. I'll take my answer off the air.
Well, you know, it's funny that you say that, because I really appreciate your opinion. I know you're on your way into work right now. I hope it's a lot more beautiful in California than it is here in Massachusetts, because we get some warmth, but it's rainy. And I think it's important to talk about how much money are drug companies making because of the illegal distribution of this drug. And there was no better time to see that than when people were being prescribed 30 days of some type of opioid-based painkiller, right? People didn't use it, and they'd either flush it down the toilet or go to a drug reclamation program, or if they were poor or they were figuring out how to get by, they'd say, hey, you know what? I have the opportunity to sell a couple of these. I'm not going to inadvertently kill somebody. And some people died. And at the end of the day, the drug companies still made their money. And there was a point in time where a doctor wouldn't give you anything less than a 30-day prescription. So how much more money did drug companies make for the additional 22 days of opioid-based painkiller that you didn't need? So people made lots and lots and lots of money on the deaths of American people. And this is across the board. It's not just Big Pharma. I'd also argue that it's big government, right? And the Afghanistan war is still being fought. The only issue is it's being fought here on our grounds. So I really appreciate the calls. I really appreciate the comments on Facebook Live, whether you were on Facebook Live, WSAR.com, whether you were listening to me on TuneIn Radio, or whether you're listening to me on the AM airwaves from Cape Cod to Rhode Island. I've really enjoyed myself today. This is a topic we need to continue talking about. This is a topic that we need to be open and honest about, and that's the only way we're going to be able to fix it.